In the quiet suburbs of Illinois, Michael Gargiulo's dark impulses lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge. A bully turned predator, he found power in control, obsession in watching, and thrill in taking life. He was the killer who blended in, the handyman, the neighbor, the man you trusted to fix your heater. But behind that friendly smile was something far more sinister. From Chicago to Los Angeles, his victims never saw him coming, and by the time they realized the danger, it was too late. For years, he evaded justice, slipped through the cracks of a flawed legal system, hiding in plain sight. But even the most meticulous killers leave behind a trail. And when the blood of a survivor exposed him, the walls began to close in. Stay tuned to find out how the actions of one man gripped Hollywood with terror and how the efforts of the police force, backed by forensic science, brought the decade-long reign of a monster to an end. Welcome to another episode on Crime Matinee, where we deep dive into chilling stories that reveal the darkest corners of human behavior and the lessons we can learn from them. In this episode, we talk about Michael Gargiulo's reign of terror as he stalks the streets of Hollywood at night and how he was made to face justice. If you've been enjoying Crime Matinee so far, please like and share our videos, leave a thumbs up and drop comments down below so I can reach out to you. And don't forget to subscribe so you can be notified whenever I drop a new video. Let's delve in. Michael Thomas Gargiulo was born on February 15, 1976 in Glenview, Illinois, a quiet suburb of Chicago. The 1970s and 80s were a turbulent time in America. Economic downturns, rising crime rates, and shifting family structures created a generation of children growing up in an era of uncertainty. Glenview, however, was the kind of place where families settled to escape the chaos of the city, a middle-class enclave where neighbors knew each other. Children played in the streets and doors were left unlocked at night. But even in safe neighborhoods, darkness can take root. Little is known about Gargiulo's formative years, but what is known paints a troubling picture. He grew up in a working-class family, surrounded by blue-collar grit, but lacking clear ambition himself. He was reportedly a bully, an aggressive, imposing figure who exerted control over those weaker than him. Early whispers suggested he had a violent streak even as a teenager. It is often said that monsters aren't born, they're made, but in Gargiulo's case, it seemed a toxic combination of predisposition and opportunity carved his path. The early 90s in Chicago were defined by rising gang violence, economic struggles, and a youth culture that often romanticized rebellion and aggression. Yet, rather than joining a gang, Gargiulo became something more insidious and an individual predator hunting in the shadows. His victims, tales of lives stolen, dreams shattered. The first tragedy was on 13th August 1993 in Glenview, Illinois. Trisha Pacaccio was on the cusp of her future. A bright young woman, she had just graduated high school and was days away from starting at Purdue University, but she never got the chance. On that fateful night, she came home after an evening with friends. She never made it inside. The next morning, her father found her brutally stabbed on their back doorstep. She had been attacked with rage, suffering 12 stab wounds. She was just 18 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. The scene was a mystery, no clear motive, no immediate suspects. Gargiulo was a friend of Trisha's young brother, someone who had been in and out of their house. He was questioned but never charged. This failure would become a haunting mistake, allowing him to slip away to Los Angeles, where his rampage would continue. The aftermath left Trisha's family in decades of anguish. Her father, Rick Pacaccio, spent years fighting for justice. His efforts, along with a 48 Hours mystery episode that reignited interest in the case, would eventually lead to Gargiulo's indictment nearly 20 years later. The next known victim was that of Ashley Ellerin. Ashley's was a tale of Hollywood's dream cut short. At just 22 years of age, Ashley Ellerin embodied the Hollywood dream, a fashion student and aspiring model. She was energetic, social, and tragically too trusting. Gargiulo had inserted himself into her life as Mike, the furnace guy, a seemingly helpful handyman who lived nearby, but beneath that exterior lurked an obsessive stalker. He watched her, learned her schedule, and waited for his moment. On the night of February 21st, 2001, Ashley had a date with Ashton Kutcher, the rising star of that 70s show. When she didn't answer the door of her California home, her date peered through the window, saw what he thought was spilled red wine on the carpet, and left. The next morning, Ashley's roommate found her lifeless body stabbed 47 times, with such force that her skull had been pierced. Kutcher, unaware of the horror he had narrowly missed, later testified about that night, adding to the surreal tragedy of it all. For years, her killer remained unknown, a ghost hiding in plain sight. The next unfortunate victim was 32-year-old mother of four, Maria Bruno. Maria lived in El Monte, California. She was a single mother trying to build a new life for her children. Maria had just moved into a gated apartment complex, believing it would offer her safety for her and her four children. She was wrong. On December 1st, 2005, Gargiulo broke in through her kitchen window, using a knife from her own home to commit one of the most gruesome murders in recent history. He stabbed her 17 times, slashed her throat down to the spine, and mutilated her body in an act of sickening cruelty. Her ex-husband discovered the horror the next morning. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves throughout the whole community. There was no apparent motive, no explanation for such savagery. The last known victim was Michelle Murphy. 26-year-old Michelle lived in Santa Monica, California. She's the one who got away. Late one night on April 28, 2008, Gargiulo crept into Michelle's home and attacked her with a knife. But as fate would have it, his luck ran out. Unlike his other victims, Michelle fought back. In the struggle, he cut himself, leaving behind a crucial drop of DNA. Realizing he had made a mistake, Gargiulo fled, but his blood sealed his fate. It was the one piece of evidence that led the police to him. The police combined a mixture of old-fashioned detective work and modern forensics to finally bring Gargiulo down. DNA found at Michelle Murphy's crime scene linked him to the unsolved murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno. The connection back to Tricia Picacchio's cold case in Illinois came years later, thanks to renewed media interest, but even as the worlds closed in, Gargiulo was unrepentant. In jail, he chillingly stated, "Just because 10 women were killed and my DNA was there, doesn't mean I did it." Was he taunting detectives or confessing to more? Michael Gargiulo had evaded justice for nearly 2 decades, hiding in plain sight, slipping through investigative cracks and exploiting legal loopholes. But in 2008, a single mistake, a drop of his own blood, finally led to his capture. What followed was a lengthy legal battle marked by delays, strategic defenses, and a high-profile trial that kept victims' families waiting far too long for closure. Once arrested, Gargiulo did everything he could to stall the legal process. What should have been a straightforward trial turned into a decade-long legal chess match, marked by delays, legal maneuvering, and complications across state lines. California has one of the most notoriously backlogged court systems in the United States. The state's overburdened legal system, combined with an increasingly complex death penalty process, created years of delay in the case of Michael Gargiulo. His trial, which should have taken place in the early 2010s, was repeatedly postponed, forcing the victims' families to endure more than a decade of waiting before they saw justice. This legal gridlock not only prolonged the suffering of the victims' families, but also raised critical concerns about how the judicial process prioritizes cases, how defendants exploit procedural loopholes, and how inefficiencies allow dangerous criminals to linger in legal limbo. Issues of massive caseloads, the death penalty bottleneck, and the exploitation of the system by defendants have since long plagued California's courts. The judicial system handles millions of cases annually, and they're stretched thin due to California's growing, massive 39 million people strong population, not to mention their high crime rate due to its urban status, increasing the number of felony trials they have each year. In Los Angeles County alone, where Gargiulo's crimes were prosecuted, this number currently stands at approximately 1,500 and isn't any better when courts prioritize new high-profile cases over older ones, further delaying justice for up to several years. Coupled with the fact that the legal industry in these areas is chronically understaffed to meet the demands for public defenders and court personnel. California has the largest death row population in the United States, with over 700 inmates in the system as of 2024. Death penalty trials require extra legal scrutiny, as you would imagine, making the process extremely slow. Even after sentencing, death penalty cases can take decades long before execution due to the mandatory automatic appeals process and review procedures. The last prisoner was executed in 2006. Prior to this, discouraging prosecutors from seeking the death penalty to avoid this arduous process. Gargiulo's team took full advantage of the limitations of the legal system, and they repeatedly changed lawyers, filed new motions, requested additional evidence reviews. They managed to drag the case out for over a decade. Each time a new defense attorney was hired, they had to review 36,000 pages of evidence, affording him the right to file numerous procedural motions, requesting delays on the grounds of needing more time to prepare his case. An attempt of an insanity defense further slowed proceedings. This strategic stalling prevented victims' families from getting closure for years after his arrest in 2008. For context, here's a summary timeline. After the 2008 attempt to murder Michelle, Gargiulo is arrested and charged with attempted murder. 3 years later, in 2011, he's officially charged with the murder of Trisha Picaccio. However, as Trisha's murder occurred in Illinois, there were jurisdictional disputes causing delays in extradition. In 2017, 6 years later, Gargiulo's pre-trial hearing begins in Los Angeles, and then finally, in 2019, his trial begins on the 2nd of May. His sentencing is 2021, and in 2024, he's then extradited to Illinois for Picaccio's trial, a day her family had waited for over 30 years. Los Angeles prosecutors were determined to seek the death penalty, but California's backlogged court system led to numerous delays. As his crimes were committed across 2 states over 15 years, there were jurisdictional issues and the difficult task of convicting on old crimes. In response to Gargiulo's psychological defense strategy, suggesting that he suffered from dissociative identity disorder, which is, in other words, otherwise known as multiple personalities, and the fact that he suggested that he was not responsible for his actions, court ordered psychiatric evaluations, however found out that there was no credible evidence of mental illness. The trial began on 22nd May 2019. It was a trial of Hollywood meets horror, dubbed the Hollywood Ripper trial. The courtroom was packed with reporters, victims' families, and legal experts. The prosecution painted a chilling portrait of Gargiulo as a predator who watched, waited, and struck when his victims were most vulnerable. A meticulous stalker who inserted himself into their lives before attacking with unimaginable brutality. One of the most highly anticipated moments was the testimony of Ashton. On the stand, Ashton recounts how he had arrived at Ellerin's house on the night of her murder for their planned date. When she didn't answer the door, he looked through the window and saw what he thought was spilled wine on the carpet. In reality, it was Ashley's blood. His testimony humanized the tragedy, showing how fate had barely kept him from being another victim. The prosecution's key evidence was Gargiulo's DNA, which was found at the Murphy's crime scene, irrefutably placing him there. There was blood and forensic samples linking him to the Brunner and Ellerin murders, and there were witness testimonies from survivors and acquaintances testifying that Gargiulo stalked women obsessively before attacking them. Former co-workers claimed he bragged about getting away with murder. In his own words while in jail, Gargiulo boasted that just because 10 women were killed and his DNA was there didn't mean he did it. On August 15, 2019, after 3 months of trial, the jury convicted Gargiulo on all counts of murder and attempted murder. On October 18, 2019, the jury recommended the death penalty. However, due to California's death penalty process being notoriously slow, Gargiulo's formal sentencing was delayed until July 16, 2021, when he was officially sentenced to death by lethal injection. The judge did not mince words. Everywhere that Mr. Gargiulo went, death and destruction followed. He is a psychosexual serial killer who takes pleasure in the act of murder. While Gargiulo sat on California's death row, Illinois finally moved forward with charging him for Tricia Paccaccio's 1993 murder. It has been delayed because California's stance meant Gargiulo would be tried for the crimes he committed in California first before Illinois, and on September 6, 2024, he was extradited to Cook County, Illinois to stand trial for the crime that started it all. If convicted, he faces life without parole. Michael Gargiulo's crime teach harsh lessons about trust, vigilance, and the dangers of the unnoticed predator. Persistence pays off. Decades of detective work finally brought him to justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. Bureaucratic delays allowed him to claim more victims. He hid in plain sight. He was the friendly heater guy, the neighbor, the helpful stranger. Ultimately, evil does not stay hidden forever. For Gargiulo, the walls closed in, the evidence mounted, and the Hollywood Ripper, once an elusive shadow, was finally unmasked. Justice came late, but it came. He exploited kindness and familiarity. He struck when no one was looking, but in the end, his mistakes caught up with him. A single drop of blood, a survivor's will to fight, and a father's relentless pursuit of justice. And so justice came, not as swiftly as it should have, not before more lives were taken, but it came, and in the end, the predator fell. Monsters don't always look like monsters. They wear masks of normalcy, moving undetected, preying on those who trust too easily. Michael Gargiulo was not the shadow lurking in the dark alley. He was the one that waved to you on the street, the familiar face who never seemed out of place. His story is a warning. Evil is not always obvious, and vigilance is the price of safety. But justice, no matter how long delayed, has a way of catching up with even the most careful of predators. In the end, the man who thought he was invisible was finally seen for what he truly was, a killer with nowhere left to hide. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. See you in the next one.